Hey everyone, so today the subject is the album Presence, which is Zeppelin's 7th studio album, and it was recorded at the end of 1975, November of 75, in Munich, Germany at Musicland Studios. The engineer was Keith Harwood, whom Jimmy had worked together with on the previous album on Physical Graffiti doing the mixes. And the album kind of came together rather quickly. It was recorded during a time that was pretty stressful for the band, in particular for Robert, because they had been riding high through early 75 after their successful US tour, which culminated in March, late March of 75. And then of course they did the very successful run of shows at London's Earl's Court in May of 75. So they were actually regrouping, looking to get back on the road and tour the US later in 1975. But while on holiday in Greece, I think it was the Isle of Rhodes, Robert and his family were involved in a pretty bad car accident, which left him with some broken bones and a shattered ankle. And his wife was actually in worse condition from the accident. And in the midst of all of this, the band were having to spend time on tax exile at that time. So they really couldn't stay in England for more than a certain, allotted time because of the tax laws. So Robert had moved to Los Angeles, to Malibu actually, for the time being to recuperate, and had to be, apart from his family for an extended period of time in the fall of 75. So with the plans for a upcoming tour dash, they decided to work on an album. And Jimmy convened with Robert there in Los Angeles, and they started to work on the tunes for what would become the Presence album. And there were rehearsals that took place in LA and Hollywood at SIR Studios. I've actually rehearsed at SIR before, so it was kind of cool to be in that same studio. And that would have been sometime around like October of 75. They put the album together rather quickly because by December of 75 it was finished, it was recorded, and they worked on the mixing in early 76, and it was released just a few months later in late March of 76. So for Zepp, that was a pretty quick turnaround from recording to actual release. I think the first album was somewhat of a fast turnaround time, but most of their other albums, there was usually more time that it took between the recording and the actual release, oftentimes because of the cover art production and stuff. But in this case, it came out rather quickly, and the album has sort of an atmosphere, I think, for a lot of people, particularly Zeppelin fans. It has a kind of a darker vibe, and what I mean by that is just like the mood, the overall mood of the album has a bit more of a heavy kind of weight to it, or gravity. The songs are real heavy riff-based songs. It's mostly a heavy rock kind of album. There isn't really any, folk elements on it. There's hardly any keyboard. If there is keyboard, I think it's only in Achilles' Last Stand. I think there's a little keyboard part at one point in the song toward the end, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure, but I think I hear it in there, and I've heard other people mention it. So regardless, it's a heavy guitar riff based album, and I love the album. I love every song on the album. It's masterful drumming from Bonzo once again, playing to the riffs, playing to the melodies so distinctively like he does. I mean, there's so many distinctive beats on the record, from Hot's On for Nowhere to Candy Store Rock, and of course the masterpiece, the epic Achilles' Last Stand. So I'm going to do some demos, as I normally do, of each song and talk a little bit about the grooves and look at some of the fills. I really think Presence was somewhat underrated in terms of, the comparisons to other albums in their output, and I think it may be the least best-selling of their albums. I'm not sure about that. But it did pretty well at the time. They played a couple songs from it on their next tour in 1977. They played Achilles, of course, and they played Nobody's Fault But Mine. But most of the other songs they never really played until, they did For Your Life at the O2 concert, which everybody was, thrilled about because that's such a great song, and to hear that live was great. So one thing I would like to mention is I've been in touch with the drummer from the band Detective, who were signed to Swan Song. I believe it was in 1975 they were signed, right after the label was created. And the drummer's name is John Hyde, a great guy, and he shared some stories with me about being at SIR Studios at the time Zeppelin were rehearsing the album, because Detective was also rehearsing at SIR at that time. So he actually got to sit and watch the band rehearse some of the songs that would be on Presence. And he said it was just incredible to sit that close to Bonham. He was like sitting right next to him as they were rehearsing. And he had the Amber Vistalite kit for the rehearsals, which is interesting because there's a recording from the rehearsals. It's a very short recording. There's only a couple fragments on it, but there is a faster version of what would become T for One, and Robert's not singing the lyrics of T for One. He's just singing some like blues hoochie coochie man kind of lyrics, and the song would take on a lot of significance because of what had happened to him and his wife in the accident, and the time that they had to be apart from each other. And the song has a very longing kind of lyric. But in this particular version, it's just basically like a sort of an up-tempo blues, and Bonzo's playing a lot of fills throughout it. It's a great little document of them in the studio rehearsing. But it does sound like the Vistalites to me, because the sound of the drums is a bit harder. It has that Vistalite sound. Regarding what he used in the studio in Munich at Musicland, there's this speculation. I don't know where this rumor started, but a lot of Bonzo fanatics know about it, that there was a Silver Sparkle kit that was oversized that he used, that had like a 15 by 12 and possibly even an 18 and a 20 floor tom. There's no hard evidence of that, and as you all probably know by now with these videos that I make and discussing the timelines and the history, I'm a stickler for the facts and for the details, and if they don't exist, I take it with a very large grain of salt when I hear something like that. Like, oh, he used, this kit that no one has ever seen, and there's some photos of it, but there's no proof that was used in the studio. And in fact, there was a thread, I think it was on Instagram or Facebook, where someone brought that up, and Jason Bonham, that is, said, "My dad played the Green Sparkle kit in Munich. I ought to know, I was there." So, of course, he would have been a very young lad then, probably about 10 years old. I think he and I are born the same year, 1966. So, yeah, he would have been like 9 years old. But that's what he said. So I would take his word for it, that if he said he remembers the Green Sparkle kit, that's what I'm going with. There's no proof, there's no photographs. Zeppelin were very private, especially when it came to the studio and rehearsals and recording. There's just such a scant amount of evidence, when it comes to Bonzo's gear in the studios. Anyway, I'd like to move right along and get into demoing some of the songs, starting with the first song, which is Achilles' Last Stand. So here we go. Okay, so let's take a look at this beat, the components of it. It's a pretty straightforward beat, but it has quite a bit of interesting bass drum work and quite a bit of ghosting, and it shares, you know, some things in common with, I guess, The Song Remains the Same beat. But what I find interesting is that Bonzo played this guitar riff on the snare drum. And, you know, I think, like, if I were presented with this song in the studio, or, you know, many other drummers were given the opportunity to play this song the first time, I think most of us would probably play a pretty straightforward beat, something more similar to The Song Remains the Same. You know, something like this. You know, that's very likely what I would have come up with had this song been presented to me. Another thing is, Bonzo is playing eighth notes on the hi-hat, but they're not really strict eighth notes. You know, they're not like... There's more dynamics to the way he plays his hi-hat usually, especially at all tempos really, but especially at a fast tempo. There's a lot more of a dynamic shape to them. In particular, kind of emphasizing the downbeats and accents, while a lot of the in-between notes are not necessarily as loud, or certainly not the same volume. So, for example, like this. Quite a bit of ghosting in the left hand. And then you have, of course, the snare drum playing the main part of that riff in unison with the guitar. That little bit of the riff. This one. That to me is one of the things that obviously gives it a lot of personality and character above and beyond just playing a fast, straight ahead rock beat. So I went ahead and played the big fill, the first big fill, and I want to break that one down right now. So that fill, it basically comes in, there are a few notes that he plays sort of as a pickup, a couple quick triplets. They're all triplets. It's a triplet fill, and it kind of lands on beat 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, crash, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you see how those pickups lead to beat 2? You've got 3 notes right there. So that rim shot is on beat 2. Now the way I just played it, I played it left, right, left, which is leading into all single strokes. That is probably the way Bonzo did it. I don't know, without seeing him actually play it and slow it down. It's almost impossible to tell. As I said, I usually get into that by playing 2 strokes with the right hand, thusly. Okay, so that's the first 3 notes are right, right, left, and then all single stroke triplets around. Or you could play what I played the very first time, which is left, right, left. So they're all single strokes, but you start with the left hand, which are 3 pickups into the downbeat. So once again, that's this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
So at a slower tempo, that's what this sounds like. You see how that fits in? So it doesn't just start right on B2. It's not this. That's cool and that works, but he leads into that fill. And whether you do it left, right, left, and then go around, or you do right, right, left, right, like I do, and go around, it's fine. You know, whatever works and feels comfortable. I would say learn to do both. So I'll do it both ways in sequence and then move on. So I don't know if you could tell the difference, but I did do them in that sequence of the single strokes first, and then the second one was starting with the double stroke. One thing you can do to practice this, to make it around, because that is quick, and when Zeppelin played this live, it was even a bit faster usually. And sometimes Bonzo would do it, sometimes he wouldn't. I think at Nedworth he does it, and it's pretty damn burning. It's a fast tempo, and he just flies across the toms, and he's got that big 15 up here. It's just, you know, it's incredible. So I would suggest practicing this at a slow speed, get it really in your hands, and then build up the speed, obviously. So comfortable with moving across the drums with triplets at that speed by starting slower. Okay, so, and that's just the first, you know, less than a minute, I think, of the song. So from there, he goes into there are different sections between the vocal verses like this. That's one of the classic fills. Another fill that he plays on the song, I'm not going to play the whole song straight down because it's going to start, I'll be getting long-winded, and I want to make this as concise as possible. But you have this fill. That's a pretty common Bonzo fill, this one.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Next up is the 5/4. I call it a 5/4 section because it's basically 5 long beats. Now, you know, I think of that as 5/4, but it's not in the same tempo, at least symmetrically. It's not just a 5/4 based off of the 4/4 of the song. So if the tempo of the song is here,
1, 2, 3, 4.
if it went into 5/4 after that, you're at this tempo.
So that'd be.
clearly that's not the case. So it's a tempo shift, and I'm not really sure, because I've learned this, just by memory and by ear so long ago. I'm not sure what these guys had in mind. If they were specifically thinking of a subdivision of 4/4, like a dotted quarter, like
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4.
And that becomes the new pulse. That's close. I think that's close in tempo, but to me it just feels like a time stretch. They go into a different tempo, and it's a long 5/4. So, for example, this is what happens. 'Okay, so now we come to that big fill. And that is a pretty simple fill. It's a pretty simple structure, technically. It's simply left, right on the snare, and then left, right on the cymbals with the bass drum together. So it's this.
1, 2, 3, 4.
But it's at a breakneck speed. So to pull that baby off, you've really got to be confident and sure that you've got it in your hands and your feet to be able to throw it in there at that tempo. That particular figure reminds me of something Tony Williams used to do. Maybe Billy Cobham. And I don't know if Bonzo heard one of them play that, heard Tony Williams, or saw him at some point. I don't know. It's a remote possibility. It may just simply be that it's an idea that he came up with sort of on his own, But Tony used to play that quite a bit. And as a matter of fact, I'll try to insert a little video clip here if I can squeeze it in. So again, to practice that, start out slow. That's... There's a fill that he plays twice more, and it's similar to this last one. But what I think he's doing, it sounds like he's crashing the ride, actually. It's toward, the latter part of the song, is this. Okay, that's another massive fill. And that's a simpler fill. It's basically just... But I think he's doing a double stroke on the bass drum, like a pickup into those crashes. So that's this. You see that? that, so that's... When you're at tempo, it goes by pretty quickly. So that's basically the tune. I mean, the only other thing that I could think of that's a variation is on those that long section where Plant is saying ah ah. Bonzo starts doing the double bass drum bubble. You know, that little bubble skip that he plays on, like he does on "Song Remains the Same" from the '77 tour. This thing. There's ghosting in there as well. It's not just, and it's not just, that would make it, frankly, a lot easier if it was just, if it was just. But there's ghosting involved. So that is the epic Achilles' Last Stand, which opens the album, and rightly so, it's considered one of Bonzo's greatest performances. Let's move on to track number 2. Okay, For Your Life. So that's how For Your Life comes in. Pretty straightforward stuff, but again, Bonzo playing to the beat, playing to the riff. The bass drum is perfectly locked in with those figures. And then from that point, we get into this section that has some fancy footwork and a bit of odd bar lengths. So that groove is like this. Okay, so forth. So those the great use of space is one of my favorite things of bass drum in that groove. I mean that's quintessential Bonzo right there, and I just love how he doesn't do anything other than just groove and lets the bass drum speak for itself in those little gaps. Again, another little very slick omission of the regular beat to give this feeling of like a little disorientation. It's beautiful drumming. It's my favorite stuff, really. So that's essentially the drumming on For Your Life. You know, you've got a lot of ghosting going on there again. That kind of thing, the James Brown type, you know, left hand, Clyde Stubblefield, you know. Okay, Royal Orleans, or Orleans, as you may pronounce it. I think down there they say Orleans. Royal Orleans is a hotel in New Orleans that the band hung out and stayed in and partied and so forth. The lyrics to this song are quite funny. I'm not going to go into what the meaning is here now, but look them up. They're pretty funny. at one point he says, when I step out with my sugar, she better not talk like Barry White. So I think that gives you an impression of what the subject of the song is about. Poor Jonesy. Jonesy was being ridiculed on this one. But so there's a version of this where Robert sings in the style of Dr. John. He's, screwing around, I hope. That, of course, didn't make it to the record. But it's pretty fun to listen to. It's on the bonus material from the special edition version. And speaking of the special edition version, there are often studio notes, photographs of the actual studio notes and studio time with the multi-track, log that shows the instruments and the different microphones that, the lines, the tracks that were used. And what I found interesting about this album in seeing those notes is it appears that the drums are tracked not necessarily close mic'd. I mean, there's nothing that says toms or there's bass drum, and then I believe it says ambient mics. I'll post a photo of it here now. I'll post a photo here so you can see. It appears to me like there's only maybe 5 mics and nothing that says tom, floor tom. So the sound of this album, I think has a bit of a different sound, and it does kind of sound like a more ambient or room miking type sound. So maybe, I don't know if they were using the Glyn Johns method again for this one, or it was just simply a couple overheads and room mics and a bass drum and snare drum mic. But the drums have a more open and blended kind of sound, but they're a little thuddy sounding. And I wonder if he did tune down a little differently or tuned them, differently for the session. This particular tune has a separate track for overdubs that says congas, because there's congas in it. Which is down on Bourbon Street, it's right, that part. You can hear Bonzo playing congas, but you also hear some hi-hat barks that I've always played them, two-handed on the hi-hat, and I'll do the demonstration of it. But I wonder if he actually overdubbed those barks, because it says hi-hat overdub. And it seems like, often Bonzo would overdub hi-hat parts. He did it in Southbound Suarez. I believe he did it on Over the Hills and Far Away. He also did it on Ozone Baby. There's several examples, in other words, where this kind of thing is dubbed in. Whatever it might be. Okay, let's just look at that part now then, since I'm talking about it, and then I'll go to the main groove. So that part of the song, he's not playing the riff on the snare drum. So he plays the riff on the snare drum.
Right?
But later in the song, he plays through it. And I always thought he was doing this. I've listened to this song so many times, like all of these over the years, and I always thought the hi-hats sounded like sometimes they're not exactly in sync. And I just thought, well, that's because, it's a little bit of a tricky thing getting those splashes in there. But I wonder if it was added later, and that's why it has that sound. So listen closely to it and see what you think. Based on seeing those studio track notes, I think that he likely overdubbed those barks. Now, whether or not he was going...
or going...
who knows? It's kind of hard to tell. He could be playing eighth notes and then overdub the 16ths. So he would be playing kind of like Southbound Suarez, where I believe he's going...
what's the beat again?
here's the main part of the groove.
Feel it. Now. Pardon me.
The old Rogers Supreme hi-hat stand. I hope it holds up forever. Same kind Bonzo used at this time. So that's the main couple parts of the groove. What else is in there? The congas come in. It's a very funky beat. You know, lots of ghosting. Let's see. There's a big fill toward the end. So that one is open to interpretation too, but I think that this is usually what I do at that point. So let me just get to that point. See. That's usually what I do. Now, he might do this. He might go. Who knows? It's hard to tell. I do hear some different tones in the cymbals, so maybe it is. Nobody's Fault But Mine is up next. And another really inventive interpretation of an old blues number. Essentially, it's Zeppelin's original riff and arrangement, but the song's lyrics go way back. Blind Willie Johnson, I think, and I think Nina Simone recorded it. And it was more of like an 8-bar blues, their version. Of course, Zeppelin's got all kinds of stop-starts and interesting, dramatic aspects to it, like they normally do with their compositions. And Bonzo plays this one brilliantly with a great use of space in the groove. I'll just play through a couple of the sections. If you're familiar with Zeppelin, you're familiar with the song, and I'm not going to play the whole song down from memory, and I have other cover versions of it available on my channel if you want to check out the entire song. But essentially, the first thing that I want to mention is after the introduction, those big cymbal crashes, da 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 da, those 4 cymbal crashes. Bonzo doesn't just play crashes without something happening. He rarely does that, or anything. His other limbs are often doing something. So in this case, he doesn't do this. He doesn't go. That's correct, and it's perfectly fine. But what he does is this. So it's a syncopated rhythm. He's filling in the spaces with his ghosting in the left hand.
then the beat.
So with that beat, it's a fairly straightforward beat. There's some variations in the bass drum pattern, ghosting on the snare. And later on, you've got the big hits, right? So.
So
I think he plays the bass drum with at least two of those, the first note and the first note and the third note, because it gives it more punch, more wallop. You know, I don't think he's going, because that sounds too heavy. But I do hear the bass drum involved there. Yeah, I screwed that up. But so the first set of accents is different than the second set, which is different than the third set. And this kind of compositional thing, you know, this is so cool and it's so unusual and it makes this song so distinctive. I mean, what a strange set of accents to put in there. You know, it's very progressive, actually. That last one is just different, is slightly different than the others. And then the last set of them.
3, 4.
Then we get into the harp solo, right? Again, the Tony Williams fill, right?
Okay,
Nobody fought for mine. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
2, 3, 4. turn this up now. Okay.
That's basically the end of the song. Oh, baby, baby, I got my spoon inside your jaw. Well, can you imagine Elvis singing that lyric? So this is kind of Zeppelin's tribute to Elvis, Candy Store Rock. And Jimmy does his best Scotty Moore on this, playing his big old ES5 Gibson and some acoustic guitar as well. And Bonzo plays a beat that is not unlike, well, it has something in common with Sick Again, in that it's displaced. So you can hear it in one place, but in actuality, the beat is in another, if you're not hearing it in the right space, in the right place. So what I mean by that is this. The beat starts on the one that he plays. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice that I'm playing the beginning of each bar with a right-left on the snare rather than two lefts. And that's because, as far as I can hear, I don't hear the bell of the cymbal on the very downbeat of each bar along with the snare drum. In other words, I don't hear this. I don't hear that. What I hear is this. Okay, that's just, that's what I hear, and that's what I think he's doing. And then there's the next section, which is this, So he's dancing around quite a bit on the bell as well. He's not just playing straight eighth notes. There's a little bit more going on up there. And then there's the last section with the fills and the cymbal crashes. So I'll get into that now. Okay, so next up is Hot's On For Nowhere, a song that features quite a bit of variety in Bonzo's drumming. Even though it's not that long of a song, there's a lot of different parts and grooves to it. The song starts out with a sort of stop time figure and goes something like this. Okay, so that's the first part of the song. The groove that he plays when he switches over to double hands on the hi-hat has a little bit of a swing to it. It's not real straight, so it's more like, you know. Okay, so you've got the next variation in groove is the oh part, which is this. Okay, getting a little further ahead there. There's sort of a double time shuffle that he goes into. That's an interesting beat. He's sort of like shuffling onto the snare with his right hand and then back to the hi-hat. The part that just precedes that, of course, Zepp aficionados will recognize that as being an adaptation of Walter's Walk. It's the same riff. Okay, so that double time shuffle is basically this. You know, you can vary it up with some ghosting, but that's basically the beat. And then there's some big fills at the end. I don't have them all memorized in order, but, you know, like... Again, what is he doing? Is he doing that fill, or is he going... I did a whole video a while ago on this tune looking at the different options, and if you listen to that fill carefully, if you slow it down, I hear an assortment. I hear a variety. I hear, maybe one stroke on the bass drum at a time, sometimes two. So he could be going... Which the difference between those two is this.
Or
Two strokes on the bass drum, squeezing them in between.
or
That's kind of like the Darlene fill, right?
so 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so we come to the last song, which is T for One, which is an absolutely beautiful and soulful blues number that features some incredibly soulful drumming from John Bonham. I mean, everybody's performance on this track is outstanding, and they really hit you in the gut with the emotion. But Bonzo in particular, the way he plays this song, it's like he's really channeling the kind of longing energy that is in or sentiment, I should say, that's in the lyrics. The song is about Robert Plant's difficult time away from his family, and in particular from his wife Maureen during the tax exile time and recuperation after his accident in Greece. And, it's one of the most moody and outstanding performances that was ever played, in my opinion, by the band. Jimmy's guitar solo was just, exquisite and so full of heart and soul. The song starts with an introduction that's somewhat odd. It's interesting, and I really like it, but it's kind of an interesting choice to start with this riff that leads into the 12/8. So the song basically begins with this groove, So that's basically the groove. It's 12/8 blues, a lot of ghosting, very open bass drum sound, a lot of space, and he plays these triplets very often and little rolls, that's the overall groove. Just before the guitar solo, there's like a sort of an interlude in the form where he just kind of smashes out these cymbal crashes along with the guitar riff, you know.
And then a fill.
So the only thing I'm going to say there more about this song is, you know, when playing a blues like this, just really be conscious of all the other stuff that's happening in between the backbeats and the bass drum beats, like all the ghosting, the little subtle swinging parts on the ride cymbal, hi-hat, you know, in and out. If you play it on 2 and 4, you play it on all 4 beats or whatever, just so that it's tasteful and you orchestrate a tasteful kind of blend of the instrument. So, you know, I mean, of course, playing a straight blues beat on this works, but the flavor and the soulfulness that comes out in Bonzo's drumming is demonstrated or exemplified by all of these little tasty bits, you know, the flavoring that he gives it, his touch, and these little subtle accents that come in like breaths, you know. You know, leave space once in a while. You don't have to play the same bass drum pattern of. So that concludes the analysis and demo of Led Zeppelin's Presence album. Thanks very much once again for all of your support of my channel, to all the followers and subscribers, and also all of the generous folks who have donated to the channel through my PayPal account, which you can see the account in the description, in the video description. If you feel inclined to make a donation, I really appreciate it. It helps me to continue doing what I'm doing and kind of make some upgrades to the quality of the audio and the video. I just got some new mics recently, some Tom mics, and I got a couple nice new Beyerdynamic M160s. And I got a new interface as well, which I'm really loving. I think the quality of the sound is much improved. So a special thanks to all of those people who have donated to my channel. I really, really appreciate that kindness and generosity. And keep an eye out for new stuff from People's Front of Zeppelin. We have a pretty epic Dazed and Confused that's going to be coming out very soon. Just finally getting the video edited together for that. That should be a lot of fun. And we also have a website, peoplesfrontofzeppelin.com, and that's loaded with all kinds of extra videos and features that you don't find on the YouTube channel. We've got play-alongs, so if you're interested in playing the drums or bass or guitar along with our versions, you can select whichever play-along you desire. And there's also instrument cam videos, so you can get a bird's eye view of the guitar parts or the bass parts or drum parts for all of the videos that we've made. So check out peoplesfrontofzeppelin.com. We've also got some cool merch on there. T-shirts like this one are available, mugs, pillows, all kinds of crazy nonsense. So once again, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you real soon. Peace.